Right, hi there YouTube, and yet again thank you very much for joining me. In this video we're going to be taking a look at cybersecurity reports, why they're necessary, how to craft up a basic template, what it will consist of, and why they're important. Now, in order for us to do this, there are a few things that we're going to take a look at. And this is in relation to the Certified Information System Security Professionals book. Now, this book is slightly out of date. It's the 8th edition, but when it comes to cybersecurity, and certainly with respect to the documents, they're living, breathing documents in the sense that they're constantly updated and live. So that aspect of this book is still going to be relevant, even though this is the 8th edition. The current book is on the 9th, which I've now got on order. But we're going to go over some of this, and then we're going to have a look at a template that's been created, and we'll gloss over that in brief. So that is coming up on today's show.
Be strong.
Okay, so we have the 8th edition guide of the CISSP, a Certified Information System Security Professional book. This is the 8th edition, it's slightly out of date now, but there are a few pages that we're going to have a look at, and we're going to go into this more in depth, and it's to develop, document and implement security policy standards, procedures and guidelines. And it reads, for most organisations, maintaining security is an essential part of ongoing business. If their security was seriously compromised, many organisations would fail. So to reduce the likelihood of a security failure, the process of implementing security has been somewhat formalised with a hierarchical organisation of documentation. Each level focuses on a specific type or category of information and issues. Developing and implementing documented security policy, standards, procedures and guidelines produces a solid and reliable security infrastructure. This formalisation has greatly reduced chaos and complexity of designing and implementing security solutions for IT infrastructures. Pretty much. Now, there are security policies here which would be defined within a cybersecurity document. Now, this is usually going to be done before the fact of a breach. After the fact, it's a little bit different. As we will see when we move over to our computer in just a moment. But what we're going to do is we're now going to turn to page 67 of volume, the 8th edition. And there are quite a long list here of threats to be identified along with the vulnerabilities. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and read all of those, but I'm sure you can pause the video just to take a look at that. But in your cybersecurity policy document, you would need to cover a lot of this. And then, in particular, what we're going to be looking at would indeed be on Chapter 19 under Investigations and Ethics. And more specifically, it would be exactly here on page 856 of Chapter 19. And it is the whole reporting and documenting investigations. You may wish to actually pause that and read that at your own leisure. Okay, so basically what we can do now is move over to our computer and take a look at what a couple of cybersecurity policies may entail. Okay, so we are at the computer and we are going to take a look at our cybersecurity sort of documents that we have. We have indeed an incident report and a general cybersecurity report. Let's start by the incident report, just purely my mouse was there. Let's open this up. It's a template and it's fairly exhaustive. You'll get an idea now of just how much work has to go into these. So, with regards to our incident report, we have Section 1, the executive summary, which would cover the date of the incident, who it's reported by, so name and title, the affected systems, so it's a list of the systems that have been affected, and an impact summary, so that would be a brief summary of the impact or what has happened. Then the current status of the incident, such as whether or not it's one that's already happened or one that is ongoing. Then we have incident description. So the incident type, which is the type of incident, for example, whether it is malware, phishing, or a data breach. It could be other things as well, such as unauthorized access within a building. Should that unauthorized access involve plant room or server room? Then, of course, there's a detection method. So how the incident was detected and who by. Under that, there would be a timeline, so the incident occurrence, such as the date and time, the detection of it, the date and time, the response initiated, such as date and time, and when the incident was contained. Along with that, you would have a description of the incident, and that is detailed of what happened. Now, in relation to this timeline, what you would probably find it's quite an exhaustive document. In the event that it happens to be for a fairly moderate-sized organisation, the response initiated and the incident that it was contained, the occurrence and detection, may very well involve statements from security personnel. Those statements would need to be gathered and inserted into the incident description timeline. And whether or not there was any authorities called in terms of law enforcement, that would need to be documented as well. Now, in addition to this, in terms of the UK, there is what's known as PACE, which is the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, or PACE as it's known, and subsequently you would require permission to get hold of the PACE notes from an officer who has attended the scene, and that would have to go in terms of the response initiated as well. So it can be quite a lengthy document. Now in section 3, the affected assets are listed. For example, systems and devices. A list of affected systems or devices would need to be listed. The data would as well, such as description of data involved if applicable, and the users, such as the number of users that were affected. Next up is the impact assessment in terms of the business, so a description of the impact on business operations, and then there is the technical impact. So there'll be a description of that, followed by data impact, so there'll be details on data loss or exposure, and the financial impact of that. So there's an estimate of financial cost, if any. Now, normally there would be a financial cost, and in terms of an organisation, that would mean further evidence would need to be gathered from insurance. So, in other words, you would have to work with stakeholders in order to gather the insurance details of that, and it would require insurers to come out and carry out their own assessments. Those assessments as well would be included in the documentation. So already you can see that in terms of an incident report, it's going to be quite a lengthy document, and we're not even halfway through. Then of course there's the response actions, such as immediate response or actions taken immediately after the incident was detected. Again, this may very well involve law enforcement, and as we said, under PACE, Police and Criminal Evidence, notes would be required from that. Then we have containment, such as steps to contain the incident. The eradication, so measures taken to remove the threat. Recovery, such as steps to recover systems and data. Communication, so details of internal and external communication. Now this would involve all forms of that, so whether it be face-to-face, if so, minutes would need to be submitted, emails submitted, copies of that, transcripts of facts, you get it, yada yada yada. Then notifications, such as any required notifications to stakeholders or regulatory bodies, which there would be in the event of a data breach. So the required notifications to stakeholders, that would be done via the documentation. That would be outlined in our second document that we will look at. Then of course we have root cause analysis, so the initial findings. So we would have a summary of that. So all of our previous aspects that we've looked at would be summarised in our initial findings, along with details of the investigation process, whether or not law enforcement was involved and whether or not PACE notes were needed. All of that would indeed be included, or whether or not it's an internal investigation, such as somebody like myself that would look at that. Next up we have root cause, to identify the root cause of the incident. Section 7 leads us to lessons learned, such as weaknesses identified. You would summarise of any weaknesses or gaps identified in security measures and the strengths noted. So positive observations or effective measures during a response. Then of course, if there are any recommendations, that would be included as well as actionable recommendations to prevent similar incidences happening in the future. Section 8 leads us to follow-up actions. So we would have immediate actions. Those steps would be to be taken immediately to address weaknesses. Long-term actions, so this is plans for long-term improvement and monitoring. Then of course the final section of that part is training and awareness, so plans for enhancing user awareness and training. Section 9 would see the appendices, so any supporting documentation or any additional documents, logs or evidence. That could come in later, so you'd need to factor that in, along with the contact information there as well, for contact details for follow-up. Now that contact information, if it's an external investigation, would need to be given. That would also be listed in the supporting documentation. Section 10 sees approval and review, so the report would be prepared by myself. It would be approved by the main stakeholder who actually brought me in to investigate the incident, there would be the date, and of course we would need the time of that. And we can save that. Then lastly, there's just the signature of relevant parties concerned. That brings us to the end of the incident report document. And now we can focus on our bread and butter report, which is the overall cybersecurity one. And this is by no means a long report. More will be added in terms of the template as we go, but this just gives you an overall idea of what to expect. So number one, you would have the executive summary, with section 1.1 being the purpose of that. So there'd be a brief description of the report's purpose, what it's for. Well, there's pretty much a clue in the title. Key findings and recommendations. Now that would involve lengthy pen tests, liaisons with security professionals, security guards, lawyers, and all of the necessary there. So working with multi-departments would bring us to our key findings and recommendations. Section 1.2 gives us our scope. So the scope of the assessment or the incident response, followed by systems, networks, and data that is covered. Now, given the fact that this is a cybersecurity report, you would find most, if not all, aspects of this would be covered. Section 1.3 leads us to a summary of findings. So you'd have high-level overview of critical findings and then a summary of recommendations. Section 2 would be the introduction, so 2.1 pretty much is our background, which would be a context of the assessment or incident, the importance of the cybersecurity review, and that would also be featured within pen test reports as well. Subsection 2.2 is our objectives, so there'd be specific goals and objectives of the report. 2.3 covers our methodologies, so the tools and techniques used, and assessment or investigation process. Now, the methodology section could be quite large, specifically if it's not just a pen test, but it involves a physical test as well. So it may involve lockpicking, in which case a full inventory of the locks and lockpicks that were involved would need to be given. The techniques for that, plus any hardware or software in terms of a computer penetration test would also need to be listed. So already this could be quite a large document. It's a living, breathing document, as we said earlier on. So this would be evolved periodically. It would evolve periodically and things may very well be added. Section 3 gives us our assessment/incident details. 3.1 is the environment overview. So you'd have a description of the IT environment, network diagrams and system architecture. Now this would be quite a long process of identifying that. So not only would you have network diagrams and system architecture, bear with me while I just go and get a document for example. Such a document would look something like that. Okay. And it would have an IP address schema in there as well. Now this is a lab sheet from a Cisco lab. There's some details that I've had to omit from that for obvious reasons because of data protection. But that would be an example of that. So you would have your network diagrams, your system architecture, IP addresses, so on and so forth. Now, moving on, section 3.2 is a vulnerability assessment. Now, this would involve the utilization of a further document because of identified vulnerabilities, the risk level and potential impact, and details of findings per system or network segment. Now with this, typically what you would find is that there would be already an existing document that would have that listed within the security policies of an organization. Then of course, section 3.3 leads us to penetration testing, such as the scope and objectives of the pen test, methods and tools used, exploited vulnerabilities and obtained access, and results of the testing. Again, a full pen tester's report would be needed, and on top of that, not only needed, but it would also have to be included within our overall cybersecurity report. Now 3.4 sees us with security controls review, so it'd be an evaluation of existing security controls, the effectiveness of current measures, and compliance with relevant standards and policies. Now with this, at least here in the UK, you've got something called SIA, which is a Security Industry Association, I do believe it is. So that would also fall within the scope of that. So you would need to detail that where appropriate, should you have security guards and CCTV on premises. Then of course section 4 is incident analysis if applicable. Now we gave reference to our incident report, so if applicable, see incident report. 4.1 pretty much covers the incident description, which would also be featured in the incident report. So you would have detailed description of the security incident and a timeline of events. 4.2 is the impact analysis, so systems and data that have been impacted or affected, and the impact to business. 4.3 is root cause analysis, such as identification of the root cause and contributing factors to that. Now, a contributing factor is anything that basically contributes or certainly paves the way for a root cause, but isn't itself the overall cause, if that makes any sense. 4.4 sees us with the incident response, so the actions taken during the incident. And then lastly on that part is the effectiveness of the response. Now again, this would also fall into your overall cybersecurity incident report, where law enforcement or external investigative procedures would be covered. That would be included within 4.4. Section 5 sees us with findings, so you'd have an introduction to that. 5.1 is detail findings, such as comprehensive details of each finding, evidence and supporting data. And this is where it would get quite lengthy, because you would have your screenshots, logs, and other relevant artifacts. Now 5.2 sees us with a risk assessment, so you'd have a risk rating for each finding and potential business impact. Now risk assessments, you would also find there would be an existing document within a business or organisation that would already have allowed for that, so that would have to be encompassed within this document. 5.3 sees us with compliance gaps, such as areas where the organisation does not meet compliance requirements. Reasons for that would have to be given. 6 is recommendations. So 6.1 is immediate actions, such as critical actions that need immediate attention. 6.2 sees us with short-term recommendations, measures to be implemented within the next 3 to 6 months. In fact, it would be a lot less than that. It would only be a matter of weeks for short term. Medium term would indeed be 3 to 6 months, and long-term recommendations would be strategic actions for long-term improvement. 6.4 leads us to best practices, so industry best practices relevant to the findings. 7 is a conclusion, 7.1 is a summary of all of the above, so the key findings and recommendations. 7.2 sees us with next steps, suggested next steps for management. Section 8 is the appendices. So within that you would have your glossary, so definition of technical terms used in the report. 8.2 is supporting documents, such as any additional documents, logs, and data used in the assessment or investigation. And 8.3 is references, so references to standards, policies, and other recommendations. This entire document would indeed have to be signed, dated, as usual, by not only myself, but the necessary stakeholders. And that pretty much concludes it for the time being. So what we can do is move to closeout. So there we have it. That's the end of another video, and thank you all again for liking, commenting, sharing and subscribing. And this video, just to re-summarise, was basically on cybersecurity reports, what they may consist of, along with a brief look at the Certified Information System Security Professional book, which is this one, the out-of-date 8th edition. So once again, thank you very much for, as we said, liking, commenting, sharing and subscribing. Please do leave all of your comments in the low bar. I read them all and respond where I can. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. But as always, take care and see you soon. Bye.